Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum. Hi, Maggie. We're just gonna get started. You guys, today it's extra sunny out here in Southern California, so I might have to adjust or move in case it gets really, really sunny. But I'm so glad you guys are here. Assalamualaikum. And let's just get right into it because this is such an important topic, and I can't wait for you guys to hear mine and Maggie's conversation. So today we have Maggie Byers with us. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in occupational therapy. She's been working in the field and practicing for 12 years, and now she's part of the Thriving Littles team, where they support parents who, just like us, we want to be amazing parents and we want to raise great kids. So through educational programs, she's doing a lot there. Check her out. If you don't follow her, definitely today you have to follow her, Maggie. She has amazing content. And we connected actually through Instagram and connected totally right away, and we were talking, and I'm like, you know what, you have to come and talk about this. So she has 4 kids under 6 and under, and just like we both, one of the things that common that we have is that we both have kids who do show aggression. And so Maggie is passionate about shifting the paradigm of how we view behavior. And let me get Maggie on here. I think Maggie, you have to send a request, I think, yes, and she did. Let me accept her. I keep forgetting how to do certain things on Instagram, guys. So here we have Maggie. I can't wait to talk about this. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Shanila. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited, Maggie. We've been talking back and forth about this all week, and let's just get right into it.
Okay.
We are going to talk about 5 ways to de-escalate our child's aggression. And I think everyone, like even us, right? Not just kids. Sometimes we show aggression, and it's something that we all deal with, and it's kind of normal.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about de-escalating because I think we get so scared, like, oh my gosh, my kids are so aggressive. They're doing hitting, biting, they're doing certain things, and we get scared. We're like, how about if they keep doing that?
Right.
And that's a fear that we all have. So we have 5 tips that we want to share with you guys. And let's start it off, Maggie. What's the first one?
Yeah, so the first step we're going to talk about is actually reframing the aggressive behavior, or even the word aggression, right? So when we think about that word aggression, that word immediately can like send us into a fight response. You know, a lot of different thoughts come into our head, like, what is this going to mean about my kid? And they're going to be a bully and all of these things. So reframing aggression to nervous system dysregulation is key, right? So when we're seeing this aggression in our kids, this kicking and hitting and biting and throwing, that can look really scary, right? Seeing it, it's like these very primitive, animalistic behaviors. Shifting away from viewing it as aggression and viewing it as our kids are in a stress response. They have a sympathetic state, and they are literally a fight response. Okay, so that would be the thing that we would want to do, is kind of reframe our mind from aggression to dysregulation. And then also thinking about, you know, how was aggression or these very developmentally appropriate behaviors handled in our childhood. You know, we're punished. Were we, you know, did our parents have this look of just like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? So kind of reflecting on those things is giving us a little bit better picture about what our stance is on dysregulation.
Yeah. So it's really them not giving us a hard time. They're really having a hard time. They're having a really hard time.
Yes. And if we even think about our own dysregulation, right? Like you mentioned, we get aggressive sometimes. That's our own fight response taking, right? So sometimes we as adults didn't get these tools in childhood. And so we may find ourselves dysregulated and really not knowing how to handle it. So these kind of animalistic, primitive behaviors can look really scary, but they're so normal. So it's so important that we're regulated in ourselves, knowing, okay, this is normal. This is just a nervous system response. I can deal with this. Is so important.
Yeah, I think when we actually reframe, then we kind of calm down. I've noticed that when I say that, like when my kids are acting really aggressively, then I'm like, okay, he's having a hard time. And right away, I'm not going there. I'm not getting at that level, or I'm not going to fight flight mode myself. I'm actually that's a way for me to calm down so I could really figure out what's going on.
And oftentimes you'll see the dysregulation continue when we are not kind of exhibiting this relational safety. You know, if we look really tense, if we look petrified, that can oftentimes perpetuate more dysregulation. So really staying calm ourselves and regulated is really important in the trajectory of where it leads to.
Okay, so let's talk about the second that kind of leads to, which is first we talked about how reframing the aggression, that is really just, they're really dysregulated. And once we can do that, then it kind of calms us down a little bit. And then we could do number two to how to de-escalate this is to get to the root of the behavior. So something that I always tell everybody, and I believe in, and a lot of people who work with parents do this, is that looking at behavior like an iceberg, and this is the tip of an iceberg. And there's just so much going on underneath. And our job is to figure out what that is. What's really going on? Like these outbursts are telling us, showing us really, that something's going on with me and I need help. Like something is off. And I don't know how to tell you, or maybe they have told you and they feel like nothing's being done about it. Maybe it's developmental that they can't do anything about it. And they don't know how else to let it out. And so getting to the root cause. And sometimes what we have to do is take ourselves out of that moment and look at the bigger picture. Like I sometimes imagine that I'm in a drone and I'm flying up like 500 feet and looking down and seeing like the bigger picture. Like what's really going on? What happened yesterday? What happened this morning? What could have been the issue, the real issue, the root cause? And sometimes I have to zoom out even more and look at the last couple of days, or look at our lifestyle this week and just different things that are going on. And sometimes it's so, like I can't figure out until I zoom out. So it could be like, man, this week has been pretty busy. I haven't gotten a chance to actually do one-on-one time or play with him. I haven't really tucked him in bed for the last 4 days, even though he didn't say anything about it. Or maybe he just said, oh, lay with me, and I didn't get a chance to, and he got over it. But maybe he didn't. Maybe he was holding it in. What do you think?
Absolutely. I love your visual imagery of that drone. It's so important to see the bigger picture, put things in context, right? We've been living through a pandemic for pretty much 2 years now. So I mean, that already, we're into this vicious cycle of dysregulation, everybody. So putting that into perspective, have there been big changes, big transitions? So I love that you mentioned that, like, a lot of kids are not going to be able to communicate what is bothering them. Behavior is their communication. They're not going to walk up to you and say, hey mom, I got, somebody said something really rude about my hair at school. And that they're going to show you in these animalistic, scary looking ways.
And sometimes we think certain things aren't bothering them. They're like, oh, I don't think that's it. But maybe it is. Maybe it's coming out in a different way instead of like verbally telling you. And a lot of times I think that we think just because our kids are verbal, then they would verbalize things. But just like sometimes in our own relationships, maybe with a friend or a loved one or our spouse, sometimes, I mean, a lot of times there is miscommunication, right? Absolutely. Like we are adults and we can talk, but then how come we have conflict?
Absolutely. Yes. I love that. I love that you, yeah. Oftentimes we expect these things of our kids, and we struggle with it ourselves. We struggle with navigating the conflict we're looking at little tiny human brains are developing, and
Yeah.
they don't have the tools yet. So
Yeah. And
absolutely.
especially I feel like the kids under 6, where they're very impulsive. They could be very impulsive. So that's developmental. I wanted to ask you, what is the difference in like the the nervous system, what's going on in their brain for like a 4-year-old versus maybe like a 10-year-old, and how it takes time to get there?
Yeah, so the prefrontal cortex is definitely, it's not developed until early 20s. And honestly, for some adults, sometimes it's not fully developed, right? Like we still see adults who handle dysregulation in an unhealthy way. And so our younger kids are always going to need us to be there to co-regulate, even into that early adulthood, teen years. Co-regulation is going to look different. Our kids' ability to regulate is going to improve. But if you have an older child and they're going through a stressful time, you might see some of the behaviors reappear. So it's important to understand that this is something that's developing for quite a while. So
I think that's really important, because we think that, okay, they're old enough now, they should be able to just tell me what the issue is. They don't have to hit their brother. Why are they hitting?
it happens at home, right? That's their safe place. That's where they know that they can let it all out. So if you can look at it that way and say, oh, he feels safe to let this out. He has to he has to hold it together at school all day, or he has to hold it together at daycare, and it all comes out at home.
So I think it's so important to, like we said, get to the root cause. Sometimes we just stuck on the behavior. We just can't, if we can't get past the behavior, we can't get past the part that, okay, he just hit or he just did something aggressive, and we're stuck there, then we can't look at what's underneath, which is the real problem, which is the real issue that we can help solve.
Yes, we come from such a behaviorist model in society where we're really focused on the behavior. We're really focused on the societal expectations and what we should be doing. And we're really moving into this new paradigm of behavior, which is looking underneath, right? Like looking for what's going on underneath our child's behavior, even our behavior, because that's start giving ourselves the compassion and the understanding, like, oh, I lost it on my kids. What was going on underneath that for me? What was I needing? So.
And a lot of times it's how we feel like we're supposed to do certain things. Well, if he can't, I don't care why he hit, he just can't hit. I don't care. I don't care what's going on. And we just want to change the behavior. So we put different Band-Aid solutions, temporary things, but that didn't really eliminate that behavior.
It often,
and a lot of times, yeah, and like, we might punish them, but that didn't really eliminate the need for that behavior to happen. So if we want them to have compassion for their little siblings, by punishing them, that's not going to help that. Actually, it's probably going to make them more resentful. Like, oh, now on top of that, you got me in trouble.
Exactly. Yes. And when we can attune, right? When we can say, oh, you were having a hard time and you hit your brother. What were you needing, right? When we're looking underneath, that is how our kids build the self-awareness to then know what they're needing. We are building that self-awareness in them to be able to, once they get older, oh, I was needing this. This is what I'm needing. And then they can voice it. But we get so caught up in the now, and we want them to be able to, do something right away, and we forget that it takes time. It takes time to develop it. But know that when you're building that awareness and you're speaking to the behavior underneath, it's marinating in there.
Yeah. And for me personally, and I think a lot of other people, I think if we think about it, like, why do we have to like change this behavior right away? A lot of times it's because of society's expectations, or our family's expectations, or someone makes a comment to you, a relative, like, oh, you're not going to do anything about that? Like, why aren't you disciplining him? And they don't understand that just because you reprimand him right then and there doesn't mean that everything is fine. Absolutely. And that's not really a solution.
So I think when we're under a microscope, yeah.
So that I think, but recognizing that like that has really helped me. That, okay, you know what? I don't care what other people think or say. I know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to do the best for my child. And if someone else has a problem with it, they can ask me. I can share with them, or I'm just going to ignore them. And,
Absolutely.
and especially if it's somebody close, if it's like your parents or your in-laws, you can explain to them what
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to do. And so it's not like you're just forgetting the behavior, but you're looking for a short, long-term solution. Like we don't know, none of us want our kids to be hitters and bullies and people who are just aggressive, but
Right.
we have to find solutions that are long-term that's really going to get to the root of it.
Absolutely.
And so that's a really big one because that involves us thinking and being really, and having time to think, right? So if we're busy all day, every day, and our kids are doing certain things, they're being aggressive, then, and we just kind of put a band-aid solution like, okay, let's get in the car, let's do this, and we don't actually figure out why that's going on, it's going to keep happening. And so we need time and space to be like, okay, I'm going to think. Maybe at the end of the day, this is something that I did. I would just find a quiet space and I would just think like, okay, what happened today? Okay, why did he hit? And then it gives me space to think and brainstorm and find possible issues. And like I said earlier, it gives me time to zoom out and just really look at the bigger picture. And then I could come up with solutions. So instead of like fear, now I'm problem solving. And then I could say, okay, next time, I think a lot of times kids do that because they do want our attention. So with my kids, what I came up with was that, okay, you know what, I'm going to try to spend one-on-one time with my son. And even if I have to put a timer for like 15 minutes, I'm just going to do that and see if that helps. And it did. So I think having that space, and it all started with me having space to think of solutions and not just do things on the go.
Sometimes it's such those like little things. I love how you're talking about zooming out because like my 6-year-old, she was really feeling like we didn't like her. Like sometimes
Wow.
sometimes we get stuck in this repetitive behavior because we feel like we're being judged, or we feel like we've taken on that persona, right? We've taken like, oh, I keep hitting, I must be a bully. And so she felt like she knows we love her, but I think she was feeling like we didn't like her. And so really, it can be something as simple as that, which is actually huge, but taking a look at the role that we're playing is also so important.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next one, the third one.
Yeah, so the next step is super important. So we're talking about how these behaviors, these, animalistic, primitive things, biting, kicking, normal, but it's also so important that we're setting the limit, right? We are not going to allow the hitting, the biting, the scratching, the throwing. And so setting a firm limit with compassion is so important for our kids, okay? And so our kids need to be contained. They need our presence in most cases. I just did a post about this today, but in most cases, kids need physical containment from their attachment figure, from the adult, and they need to be in a small space, right? So we want to decrease the visual stimuli. We want to decrease the things that they're seeing. We want to decrease the noise. We need them to feel safe, almost like they were little babies in the womb. In that position, they're safe, they're contained. Okay, so that's going to be the most important thing. So a lot of times we're going to say, I'm not going to let you hit. But for some kids, that can actually agitate them further, like we've talked about before.
Yeah, mine. I have one like that.
And actually, when they're in this dysregulated stage, they can't really process language, right? So it's really all about our body movements, our pacing. What does our face look like? Because our kids can pick up on our energy very well. So if we're saying like, I won't let you hit, but like our face is looking like, why are you doing this? They're going to pick up on that. They're not going to pick up on your words. So really embodying this calm, slow, low volume person, but being swift and being that confident leader is so important. Now there's
That's
all,
really hard,
yes,
Maggie.
it's so
Because I feel like when setting limits, it's its own topic, but sometimes I feel like a lot of parents, and I did this as well before, was that inside I would be angry. I'm just like, inside, even though outside by that, if you look at me, I'll be like, oh, it's not okay to hit. Let me move you over here. But inside, I'm mad. I'm really angry. I'm like, oh my gosh, he keeps hitting. I'm just so sick of this. That's what I'm thinking inside. And that's what he's picking up on. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yes. They can sense our energy more than our words. And when they're in that nervous system state, they're not picking up on language. They can't process our language. So it's that energy. So really taking the time to reorient yourself to the present moment, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of times when we get triggered, we're sent back to the past.
Hmm.
We are reminded of how these situations were handled when we were younger, and
Hmm.
we're fearful. We're fearful about what this means about our kid. We're fearful about this little one that's getting kicked or hit. Um, so
And
it's
judgment.
yes, and judgment, right? Like, or is this something that I'm doing wrong? So
Hmm.
orienting myself back to the present moment, looking around the room has been one of my biggest lifesavers. And sometimes, um, just taking a breath and saying, "Oh, I need a moment to slow the moment down." That's the biggest thing.
Hmm.
Is I want to slow the moment down. Everything can feel very fast, confusing. So slowing the moment down as best you can is going to be key. And yes, regulating yourself is so important.
Yes, and Angie said they can't process language. That's eye-opening, and that was great advice for me too, because I realized that with my son and all the things that you're supposed to say. And I remember one time he's screaming and he's saying, "Shut up," and then I was like, "Oh my God, he's telling me to shut up, but I should because I'm just talking too much," you know. And so instead of taking that personally, and we take that really personally, anything, the aggression, what they do and say, we take it personally. And one thing is not to take it personally. And I have this small little post-it, and I have on there, be the calm in their chaos. And so I always look at that every day, and I read that to myself. And when I read that to myself, I take a deep breath. And when the times are difficult, like the time if someone's hitting and screaming and being aggressive, then it comes to me quickly because I already know that. My body knows that. I know how to get to that calmness. So I can just say to myself, and I say this to myself every time they get aggressive, is that be the calm in their chaos. And the second thing is that they're dysregulated. That's a signal to me that they're dysregulated, and that automatically helps me come in the present. And I want to lead them, right? I'm the leader, and I get to lead them. So when I can regulate myself, I take a deep breath. Sometimes I have to go outside. Sometimes I can't tend to them right that second.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're hitting each other, and I have to take a second to breathe and then go in there. And just my calm presence changes the dynamic. You could see that. You can scoop the one that's hurt. I could take him out of the room, hug him, or the ones who's hitting one of my kids, they need a hug. That is what helps them regulate themselves. So no matter what they're saying or doing and being aggressive, I go and hug them, bring them close to me. And then I can count to 60 seconds, and I know that that's going to de-escalate everything.
Yes.
But another one of my kids, he'll run to his room, and like one of yours, you had mentioned that, and they'll close the door and they'll say, "Go away." And then I'll just stay outside. I'll say, "I'm right out here if you need me."
Yeah.
And so and I think with this setting limits is that we have to really feel that. We have to be calm. And
Yes.
we have to have that calm presence, because unless we have that, then nothing we say or do and all of these tips and tricks, they don't work because
Absolutely.
we're really not calm. And knowing that each of our kids are different and they have a different temperament, and knowing what they need to regulate.
Yeah. Co-regulation is so different for
Yeah.
different people.
Which
The co-
leads us to that next one, which is co-regulation. And one of the key points of that is avoiding disconnection. And I think a lot of times we're just like, you know what, just go away. We're dysregulated and we want our space, and we're like, you know what, just go away. Go somewhere else and do that. I
Mhm.
don't want to be by you. Did you ever feel like that? I think a lot of people feel like
Like,
that.
I think this is the piece that's so important to understand. You know, how was your behavior handled when you were younger? Because the way we parent now is significantly impacted by the way that we were parented. So if you were sent time out, if you were shamed, if you were, however parents handled your dysregulation is how that's going to show in your body.
Mhm.
So understanding that is so key, right? We want to shut down what was shut down in us. So we
Wow,
want,
that's really big.
yeah, we want to shut down in our kids what was shut down in us. And it's also something that if we're not comfortable with our own anger, then we're not going to be comfortable with our kids' anger, right? So we can set a limit on behavior, but tend to the feeling underneath. Every behavior
Wow.
feeling underneath. And so if we can get to that, if we can say no to the behavior and a big yes to the feeling, that is the key.
Yeah, and somebody said whenever I'm yelling, I hear my mom, and that's so true.
Hmm.
And I remember when my kids are aggressive, and one time I just sat with that feeling. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna welcome all the feelings that are coming through me. And when I did that, I imagined my dad like pulling, like as if he was in the room and he's like pulling my son and like throwing him across the room and saying, stop, because we don't want to see that behavior. We just want you to stop because we can't handle it.
Exactly. Yes. It's our kids are literally shining a mirror or holding a mirror up and showing us what we need to heal in ourselves.
Mhm.
It's hard. It's especially with my four little kids. I mean, it's a lot for me to process in my own nervous system. It's a lot. It's not a linear process.
Yes. And somebody said we're often reparenting ourselves as we're raising our children.
Absolutely.
And I think in that, but I feel like, one thing that I've learned through my kids' aggression and them, me having to stay there and be there calm is that and all these things come back to us. But also I acknowledge it, when I acknowledge that, oh, I see my mom or I see my dad or adults around me, and this is how I grew up, acknowledging that just kind of quiets that down in me. It's almost like, oh, okay. And it helps me reconnect to my child. And I'm not in a state of like fear anymore. I'm not going backwards. I'm present now because I've kind of already dealt with myself. I'm like, okay, this is how I was feeling. And that acknowledgement makes a huge difference.
There's so much healing in sitting with those big emotions that our kids have because oftentimes that's what dysregulates us when our kids are having, those big reactions, those big emotions that were shut down in us. And it's so healing to be able to sit with your kids' big feelings and give yourself, that little you inside you, that
Mhm.
same thing that you needed when you were little, that same attunement, that same co-regulation, because our brains are plastic, right? We've got that neuroplasticity. Each time we're able to connect, each time we're able to, sit there calmly, we're creating new pathways in our brain. And so each time it's going to get easier and easier.
It really does get easier the more we practice it. And sometimes what I notice with myself is that it just gets fewer and further apart. So if our child is being aggressive and we start yelling and screaming and we're kind of joining their chaos instead of being the calm, and then after like 2 minutes, then I'll calm myself, and then he can start being calm. And then the next time that happens, instead of yelling right away, maybe I paused, and then that helped him a little bit. And then the next time, maybe I yelled again because I wasn't present. But then just knowing all of these and all these experiences, it just leads to a bigger package of calmness, I feel like. So over time, we become calm. It's not like just try this one tip and then you're just going to be calm forever, because that's not possible. Our emotions and our feelings are always changing, and we're not always present. But I feel like when I see aggression in my kids, that now I can attune to that and become present right away. And it'd be like, okay, they're dysregulated. I'm the leader. I'm going to lead them. I'm going to bring them into my calmness.
Yes.
And get to the root cause of what's really going on and problem solve with them.
Absolutely. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to show up perfectly for our kids, and there's just no such thing as a perfect parent.
Yes.
We are beings, and so, you know, when we mess up, we might have that guilt, but that's a part of our humanity, you know, being able to make the repair is showing our kids that this is what a real healthy relationship looks like. There's a rupture and then there's a repair. It's not going to
I love that.
all the time.
Yeah, definitely. So the last thing is that way to de-escalate our kids' aggression is problem solve, and problem solve outside of that moment and figure out what's really going on, and figure out real solutions versus just kind of getting them to stop right away. And a lot of times they'll be like, okay, if you guys don't stop hitting each other, then we're not going to do X, Y, Z, or you're not going to get X, Y, Z. And we can stop that right that second, right? But that doesn't really solve the real problem, which could be of sharing, or it could be jealousy, it could be so many other things.
Yes.
So what are some ways how you are able to problem solve with your kids?
Yeah, so we definitely want to do it outside of the moment, when language is back online, when, you know, they're back to this regulated state, and we can talk about what the need was, right? So that's what we really highlight is I wonder what you were needing when you hit your brother. I wonder what was bothering you. So trying to get to that need is so key. A lot of kids, you'll be able to talk to them about it. A lot of like, oh yeah, I really want that red truck and he took it from me. Or I really wanted, you know, the shoes, he got new shoes and I didn't get any new shoes. So a lot of times they can verbalize what the need was, and a lot of times they can't. I have kids who are highly sensitive to feelings. They do not like to talk about things directly. So we do a lot of indirect kind of problem solving. We use dolls, we use play, my daughter loves to draw. We do a lot of drawing. I love using I love using storytelling. So, you know, making it as indirect as possible is something that's going to help a lot of kids. So I like to talk about, you know, oh, I remember when I was little and I had a friend, you know, that kind of thing. So and then it's so relatable. They're like, oh, you had this problem too when you were little? And they love that. Little kids love to hear about mommy was little and she hit her friend.
Yeah. And sometimes it may take a couple of hours, or it may take to the end of the day or the week. And I feel like sometimes we feel like we have to solve that problem right away. And we don't have to. We can give it space.
Absolutely.
And we can think about it. And sometimes at nighttime when I'm laying with my son, then we talk about it, because that's a time where it's dark and he can express himself without feeling conscious, you know, being very conscious of if he's showing a certain emotion, and everybody else is sleeping, or like everybody's in their room. So we have that privacy. And a lot of times even then, it's really difficult for one of my kids to verbalize and tell me. And so one of the things that we came up with, and I shared this with you, is that we have like a code, you know, where I'll tell him, okay, put up one finger if it's a yes, and put up two if it's a no, something like that. And we'll do like 20 questions, and I'll ask him, is it this, is it that? And sometimes it's frustrating because it's like, you're 8 years old, you should be able to tell me. Can you just tell me? Like, it'd just be so much easier. But I have to honor that, you know, I can't make him do that. It's something that's going to take time to develop. But just imagine, and I think sometimes we get stuck in like this age where it's great, my kid is 8, he should be able to do it. When is he going to do it? But if we look at the long term, imagine our kids as 18. And totally being capable and being amazing at communicating at 18.
Exactly.
I mean, there are adults who don't even know how to communicate properly.
Or don't know their own needs.
Exactly, and or how to express themselves and what they need, their feelings, everything. Imagine by 18 if our kids could do that. So I was telling my husband, I'm like, imagine by 18 if he can do that. So that's my goal, like just make it a long-term goal. So it's like he's only 8 right now. I have 10 years to work with him. Like if I
Yes.
just say that to myself, it gives me reassurance. It makes me a little bit more calmer, and I don't have that pressure. I'm just like, you know what? I can do this in 10 years,
Yeah.
and, somebody might be like, 10 years, oh my God, that's a long time. But then look at it from the other point of view. By 18, I don't know how many 18 years old, and I was telling my husband, how many 18 years old do you know who could do this? It's not. This is something very, a small population actually can do. And
Very.
you're giving, and this is a gift for our kids that we're working with them for a long period of time to develop this. So they can become adults who can articulate their needs, who know what they need, who knows what triggers them, who know themselves really well.
The waiting
And,
game.
yeah.
Sure.
And imagine what kind of relationships they're gonna have if they can do that. So keeping the long-term goal in mind is really, really important in problem solving.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think also knowing that just because my son hits at 8, it doesn't mean he's going to hit at 10, 12. And if you see older kids, a lot of them, they don't. But I think it really depends on like what's inside of them, helping them find different ways to get all of that out.
Absolutely.
So now if anybody has any questions for Maggie and I, then we'd love to answer. Did anything else come up for you, Maggie, that you want to touch on?
Oh, you know what I forgot to mention was when we're talking about co-regulation, it's going to look different for some kids. So I have a daughter, and I just did a post about this today. You hear this advice, don't leave their side, even if they're screaming and kicking, like they want you to stay, right? And in some cases that's true. In some cases, the kids are going to be kicking and screaming and saying, "I hate you, go away." But they really are, it's like a test. Like, can you sit with my emotions, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But this is where it's really key that you know your kid. My daughter, um, and she was constantly, it was escalating her dysregulation. She was getting more dysregulated when I would try and stay with her. And so she now goes to her room, right? So it's still a container, and I put my hand on her door, and she put her hand on her side of the door so that we're connected, but she has that barrier, right? Because some kids go into shock, right? Nervous system goes into shock. They can't handle the stimulation. And so they're not even in their bodies. And so we want to give them that space to get back into their bodies, regulate inside their own container, and then we can approach, and then we can be present. So that's my way of staying connected with my daughter, letting her know I'm right outside your door. I love you so much. I'm here when you're ready for me to come in.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and then usually right when I put my hand on the door and I say, "Put your hand up on my hand," she immediately opens the door and just like
Wow.
lets a surprise, runs into my arms. So
Yeah.
really it's important to know your child, and know
Mhm.
what co-regulation for each.
And one person asked, how do you handle whining? My son is 4, and when he cries, we always say, use your word. Is that more harmful or helpful? And
Um,
I feel like if he does use it, if he uses his words and says, oh yeah, this is what I really needed, then that's working, right? But if it's not helping him, then what do you suggest?
yeah, so use your words is I hear that a lot, and it's actually they can't use their words. That's why that's their way of communicating. So the way that I handle whining, everybody handles it differently, but in my household, I usually will say, you know, use your strong voice. Sometimes I'll say, where's your strong voice? Or, ugh, what are you needing? Usually whining is a sign that they're not getting a need met.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes in the morning, a lot of whining comes in the morning because they're tired. Everybody wants to eat and they're like, oh, give me this. And so I like to slow things down with 4 kids, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like there's a lot of voices here. It's hard for me to hear you. Can you use your strong voice? Or sometimes I'll say, I wonder what you're needing. I wonder what you're needing because it sounds like you're really needing something right now. So keying in what the need is underneath the whining and then advocating for them to use a voice that just is not going to overstimulate us, right? Because that whining immediately just triggers that just auditory overstimulation. So you can handle it a couple of different ways. It's whatever you're comfortable with, but there's always a need underneath the whining.
And sometimes with whining, like for example, it really triggers my husband. He can't handle it. Me, I can handle it. I totally can. You can whine all day to me, and that's just my kid's signal that he needs me. So sometimes what I'll do is because I'm really busy, that means like for one of my kids, that means when he's whining, it means that I stop everything that I'm doing and I just sit him on my lap. And I hug him and I say, what's wrong? Or I'll ask him, what's going on? What's going on? Tell me what's going on with you. And then he'll go ahead and tell me for those 2 minutes. He'll tell me sometimes he tells me what he wants, or sometimes he's giving me more signals to what he wants. He's not really telling me that. And a lot of times when we say use your words, we're disconnected. We're not really connected to them. And a lot of times they're whining because they want us to connect to them. So we're busy. We're not even making eye contact, and we're like, use your words, you know, and just or else I'm not going to connect to you, or else you're not going to get your needs met. And I think, especially for younger kids, they can't. And a lot of times, you know, just because we're old enough to do something, it doesn't mean we always do that. And for kids too, they don't.
And that about the connection, because I've noticed that my kids whine specifically when I have not looked them in the eye, right? When I've just been like doing the laundry, doing the dishes, making breakfast, I get so caught up in the things that I'm doing and I haven't slowed down to like sit them in my lap and hold their hand and say, I see you. Like, I wonder if you're needing me. So I love using that phrase. Like, I wonder if you're needing some time with mommy. So give them the words instead of use your words, giving them the words. To help express it.
Exactly. And sometimes with one of my kids, it gets stuck. His words get stuck because he's highly sensitive that it gets stuck. If it came out, it would be crying and crying. It would be like so many tears. So instead, he'll just hold it in and he'll show me in other ways, like whining or crying or hitting or just not listening. And those are all indicators like, you know, do you hear me? Do you see me? And every child, adults as well, we all want to be heard and seen. We all want to be, and that's a need. And our kids are going to show that to us or remind us of that in ways that come out as whining, crying, hitting, aggression, all of that. And it's really, so what we can do is connect with them instead of disconnecting and just getting wrapped up in the behavior and like, oh my gosh, I can't stand the whining. And one of the things that I tell people is that any kind of aggression, any kind of behavior, all of these, think of it like someone knocking at your door. And it's just the doorbell ringing. And if you're just like, I'm so annoyed, that doorbell keeps ringing, I'm just that annoying doorbell, but you're not going to the door, that's what it's indicating. You know, it's indicating that you have to open the door. That's the real thing that you have to do, go open the door. And our kids are inviting us through their behavior to come in and help them, to see them, to hear them. And that's something that they have a need for. And that's what we can really do. That's how we can fix and de-escalate their aggression.
Yes, I love all of your visual.
I'm a visual person, so I have to look at things visually. Any last words, Maggie? And also, can you tell us where we can find you and some of the work that you're doing at Thriving Littles?
Yeah, so you can find me at the Trauma Informed OT, and I actually just joined Katie Crosby's team at Thriving Littles. So if you go to www.thrivinglittles.com, you can work with me one-on-one as well. And we also offer different workshops and courses. So if you go to
Awesome.
that, you'll find more.
Thank you so much. And I really love having conversations with you, and
Yeah.
especially now that you can have it with other people. And this aggression is a really big topic. And but I find that the tips that we covered and that things that you mentioned, they really help. But we have to actually implement it to make it work.
Yes,
And a
absolutely.
lot of it is parent heavy, like it's for us to do the heavy lifting. That's
Mm-hmm.
because we're the adults. We're supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Bye.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. Maggie is a gem. She has a lot of great information, so definitely follow her. And if you have other ideas, other questions, other topics that you want me to cover, I'd love to hear from you and hear what topics. I love when people DM me. Please feel free to DM me. And I think I'm just going through any last minute questions. This is any tips for helping kids regulate a traumatic event like a school shooting, dealing with this right now in my community. That's really a big one. It really depends on what age your kids are. And so the answer will really vary. So you can maybe message me and then we can talk about it. But just in general, I think the first thing to do is just to validate them. In any situation when our kids come to us, if there's something, whether they're going through or feeling, you want them, and the thing is that something doesn't become that traumatic and leave a scar on us because of that thing, that event that happened. It's a lot of it is, most of it, actually all of it, is because we feel like we're going through it alone. So you want to make sure that your kids know that they're not alone. And helping them by validating them, like, oh, tell me how you feel, tell me how it felt. And then they might say, I felt really scared. And you could say that would, if I was you, I would probably feel the same way. And I was scared too. So they feel like, you know what, I'm not alone. Instead of just saying that, oh, it's okay, you're going to be okay, show them that you understand where they're coming from. So that's the first thing to do with any kind of traumatic event. And then depending on their age, coming up with different solutions for that. So it says how to show up when multiple kids are dysregulated at the same time. One thing that I do is I change the environment. So I'll just be like, okay, everybody come outside. Everybody, let's move into the next room. Something where they're standing up and they're physically going somewhere else. And what helps is going outside. A lot of time when they were younger, what I would do is that, okay, everybody get it doesn't matter how cold or hot it is, we're going to go outside, even if it's for 5 minutes. That really helped. When my kids were younger, we would just go outside. We would just have them play outside on the sidewalk chalk, on the grass, playing with the ball, or just taking a neighborhood walk just around our neighborhood. And I would tell them to look at the trees and just notice different things in the environment. Oh, do you smell that? Do you see that? And connecting their 5 senses, that really helped them regulate. And before we went inside, we would say, okay, what we're going to be doing when we get inside. Saying that, okay, you're going to be doing this, or we're going to do this. I'm going to read this book. And they're like, no, I don't want to read this book. I want to read this book. So then we figure out what we're doing. So when we come back inside, we kind of already know what is going on. So I'm just looking at any other questions. Yeah, so somebody said maybe they don't have the vocabulary to explain what's going on. And so one thing we could do is just play with them. And there's just so much research in play therapy and just playing, how it really gets everything out. Like it's almost like a way to detox for kids, is playing, going outside, and having that unstructured playtime really, really helps. Yeah, again, depending on the age. So again, I just wanted to go over the 5 ways that Maggie and I talked about how to de-escalate a child's behavior, and it is reframe the aggression to dysregulation. So they're not being aggressive, they're just dysregulated. And the second thing is get to the root of the behavior. What's really, really going on? And you can go back and listen to that part of how to do that, how to get to the root of the behavior. The third is set limits and keep everyone safe without taking sides, and also being that the fourth one is co-regulating. So avoiding the disconnection and helping them get regulated through us. By being regulated, we help them regulate themselves. And the fifth is problem solve outside of the moment. Inshallah, that was beneficial for you guys. Again, if you find other topics that you love, I would love to do live with different people who are really well versed in it, and that's their expertise. That's something that they're passionate about, and that's something that they do. So I love connecting with others who are in the parenting realm and just raising kids and have certain backgrounds that we can bring on and talk about. So in the coming weeks, we have a couple of therapists, so I can't wait for you guys to come and see what they have to say on so many different topics. And we will talk soon. Assalamu alaikum.